To finally set up this animation for rendering, let's just use the setup we prepared in the previous videos. Again, let's add another null to this one here, which we're going to call out particles like this. Pipe this in here, maybe highlight it. So as I mentioned, in this case I want to render this as particles and not as instances. So I've got to take care of deleting a few things that are on my data stream currently. For one, I only want to keep points. That's one of the most counterintuitive things in Houdini. You're going to use the add node to delete geometry and only keep the points. So let's wire this in here and check delete geometry but keep the points, resulting in this geostream now only having points. Then there are quite a few attributes which I don't want and need for rendering. So let's get rid of them with the attribute delete, which I'll wire in after the add. And before deleting these attributes, let's have a look at what I want to keep. And that is definitely p-scale, dictating the scale of the particles, and maybe MOPs fall off. Anything else can go. Same goes for the strings. Same goes for the primitives here. So let's delete everything that's on the primitives. Little mouse on it, that worked. And let's delete everything that's on the points. So yeah, we're now only left with p, the position. However, I want to exclude something from it, and that's done with this hat symbol here. So I want to exclude p-scale, and also I want to exclude MOPs underscore fall off. Little mousing on this again, and yes, that's what we're left with. Next, let's randomize these points colors using the attribute randomize, set to CD for color. Let's wire this in here. And I want the distribution to be just two values basically. One white, which is fine, and the other one, let's dial this in to be a rather nice red with the very least amount of green mixed in. Like so. And maybe let's make the probability value of B, so for white lights, a bit higher, 0.55. Okay, I highlighted this null here, so that's what's going to be passed on to the OBJ context here. And as I want to render this in Redshift, for the reason I already mentioned in previous tutorials, let's, under the Redshift Particles tab, check Render Object as Particles. However, how am I going to render my terraces and my lines? Well, for that we're going to need two more geometry nodes. So let's drop down 1, 2, call this one lines, and this one terrace. Let's dive into the terrace here, and let's access the data that we generated in the other node for this terrace using what's called an object merge, which can access other geo-objects geometry stream. Let's select my grid 1 and the out underscore terrace here. And I might want to move that down a bit using a transform, and just along the y-axis, when I middle mouse on this, I get this ladder. Let's just translate this downward a tiny bit, like so. Okay, up one level and do the same thing for the lines. So in here, dropping down an OBJ merge, which we're gonna point to our grids nodes out underscore lines. Accept that and go up one level. Let's zoom in a bit to check, and I could move down the terrace a tiny bit more, so maybe like that. In order to render those lines, under the Redshift tag, under strands, I have to check render object as strands, and in this case I want to render them as either a box or a cylinder. Let's take a cylinder, and I don't want to tessellate them, that means further subdivide them. And let's just ignore the p-scale attribute and just dial them in using the default scale. So let's set that to, say, 0.002 maybe. Let's just quickly drop down a Redshift dome light and a Redshift render op. Again, closing all these tabs here, pinning this tab, and hitting Ctrl T twice to get these three tabs, one for the out context, one for the materials context, and one for the OBJ context. In the dome light, I'll just link up an HDR. And this is a very dark HDR because it's an unlit studio, so let's just Control click on the camera. So we have a camera in the scene, let's lock that to the viewport and go to the render view and dial in our render. Immediately we're seeing a few things. Let's just increase the HDR's brightness first. Then those particles are way too big, so let's decrease the global scale multiplier. It's looking a bit better. I'm seeing those particles here. The lines come through nicely. And on my HDR, let's just as a quick hack increase the gamma and maybe the intensity. Let's just reposition our camera to maybe something like this. And on our dome light, let's rotate this so this is a bit backlit. Let's create a few materials using our Redshift Material builder. In this case, for the terraces, I want something with only a slight bit of reflection, maybe quite darkish color, and a slight blurriness, but I want to increase its IOR, so the overall reflectivity is increased a bit. Let's go up one level, call this terrace, copy it twice, call one particles, and the other one lines. For lines, I'm going to dive in here and just select the glass preset here. And for the particles, I'm just going to look up their point color. So loading in a point attribute here, which I'll pipe into the diffuse color and also in the overall emission color here. Nope, I want to use the out color like so. And in here I want to look up not the UV tangents, but CD, the color diffuse. Just make sure we have no reflection going on here. And in the overall tab, let's increase the emission power to 5. All right, let's assign those materials. Grid, those are my particles. So under the render tab, let's select the particles material. Terrace, that's gonna be my terrace material. And the lines will be my lines material, like so. Let's refresh the rendering. And we can see those individual particles appearing there now. Alright, everything else is dialing in your material's values. In this case, my terrace material is way too dark. The reflection is way too glossy on it. My light is coming through only a tiny bit. So I'm not gonna step you through all of this. I will provide you with a scene file that is set up for rendering in Redshift. And if you're interested into learning more about rendering, we've got a premium course running on that currently on our Patreon. So you might want to head over there. And apart from that, it's the usual. If you guys like what we're doing and want to support us, you might want to head over to our Patreon, and we'd like to thank all of our patrons, especially Refik Anadol, Chris Hebert, Important Looking Pirates, Encore VFX, Patrick Fillion, and Gearbox Studio Quebec. Thanks so much, guys.